You think you're so perfect with your little red sports car, don't you? Well, let's see how pretty it looks now. Those were Sandra Martinez's exact words as she dragged her keys across my pristine 2023 Mazda MX-5 Miata at 2:47 p.m. on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. My name is Olivia James. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant for Morrison & Associates in Denver, Colorado. I had just returned from lunch when I witnessed my neighbor completely destroying $8,400 worth of custom paintwork on my car. What she didn't know was that my Ring doorbell had captured every single second of her vandalism in crystal clear 4K resolution. I stood there for exactly 37 seconds, watching Sandra storm back into her house, seemingly satisfied with her handiwork. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call out her name. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the Ring app, and saved the footage to 3 different cloud storage accounts. In my line of work, I've learned that evidence is everything, and emotions are the enemy of justice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sandra Martinez had just handed me the perfect case study in how to destroy your own life in under 2 minutes of poor decision-making. As someone who specializes in tracking financial fraud and building bulletproof documentation trails, I knew exactly what I was looking at: criminal mischief, property damage, and the beginning of what would become the most expensive temper tantrum in my neighborhood's history. What Sandra didn't realize was that her husband Miguel had been making increasingly obvious attempts to flirt with me over the past 6 months. Just 3 days earlier, he had cornered me by my mailbox, telling me how sophisticated and intelligent I was compared to certain people in his household. I had politely extracted myself from that conversation, but apparently Sandra had been watching from her kitchen window. Her accusation about me parking pretty suddenly made perfect sense. Let me take you back to how this all began, because understanding Sandra and Miguel Martinez requires knowing exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. The Martinez family had moved in next door 18 months ago. Miguel worked as a regional sales manager for a luxury car dealership, while Sandra seemed to spend most of her time managing their social media presence and what she called her lifestyle brand on Instagram. They drove matching white BMW X5s, had landscaping done twice a month, and threw elaborate backyard parties every other weekend. From day one, Miguel had been overly friendly. Not in a neighborly way, but in that particular manner that married men use when they're testing boundaries. He would appear whenever I was washing my car, checking my mail, or working in my small garden. The conversations always started innocently enough. Comments about the weather, compliments about my yard work, but they inevitably shifted toward personal questions about my relationship status and lifestyle. I had remained professionally polite but distant. In my experience, investigating corporate fraud, I've learned to recognize when someone is probing for weaknesses or opportunities. Miguel Martinez had all the classic signs of a man looking for what he perceived as an easy target: a single woman living alone who might be flattered by attention from a successful businessman. Sandra, meanwhile, had made her feelings about me clear through passive-aggressive behavior that escalated over time. It started with pointed looks when I left for work in my business attire. Then came the loud comments to her friends about career women who think they're better than everyone else. Recently, she had begun making snide remarks about my car, loud enough for me to hear whenever I was parking. The spring before the incident, I had treated myself to the Mazda MX-5 Miata after closing a particularly complex embezzlement case that had taken 14 months to unravel. It was sole red crystal metallic, with custom leather interior and every available upgrade. More importantly, it represented something I had earned through years of late nights, weekend work, and building a reputation as one of Colorado's most thorough forensic investigators. What transformed Sandra's simmering resentment into destructive rage was a conversation she had overheard 3 weeks before she keyed my car. I had been getting my mail on a Thursday evening when Miguel approached me with his usual overly familiar demeanor. This time, however, he had gone further than ever before. "Olivia, I have to ask you something," he had said, glancing back at his house. "What does a woman like you look for in a man? I mean, you're clearly successful, independent, intelligent. You could have anyone you want. I had given him my standard polite deflection. I'm focused on my career right now, Miguel. But I appreciate the compliment. It's just that some women don't appreciate what they have. He had continued, stepping closer. They get comfortable. Stop taking care of themselves. Stop being interesting. But you've got this confidence that's really attractive. What I didn't know was that Sandra had been recording our conversation from her kitchen window. The recording later became evidence, but at the time all I knew was that I needed to end this interaction immediately. I think you should focus on your own relationship, Miguel, I had said firmly. I'm going to go inside now. His response had been telling. If you ever get tired of being alone, you know where to find me. According to the police report filed later, Sandra had confronted Miguel that same evening with the recording. Their argument had been loud enough that 3 neighbors reported it to the homeowners association. Miguel had apparently defended his comments by saying he was just being friendly, and that Sandra was paranoid and jealous over nothing. This was where Sandra made her first critical error in judgment. Instead of addressing her marital problems with her husband, she decided I was the source of all her troubles. Over the next 3 weeks, Sandra's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started parking her BMW at an angle that made it difficult for me to get into my own driveway. She began having her lawn care service trim their hedges at 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings, always when the workers were positioned directly outside my bedroom window. Most tellingly, she started making loud phone calls on her back patio about homewreckers and desperate career women who steal other people's husbands. I documented everything. As a forensic accountant, detailed record-keeping isn't just my profession, it's my instinct. Every incident went into a file on my computer, complete with dates, times, and when possible, photographic evidence. I had learned from investigating hundreds of fraud cases that patterns of behavior tell stories, and stories become evidence. On the Tuesday Sandra keyed my car, I had just returned from lunch with a client. The meeting had gone well. We were investigating suspected kickbacks in a municipal construction project, and I had just uncovered a paper trail linking 3 city council members to inflated contractor payments. I was actually in an excellent mood as I parked in my usual spot and headed inside to grab some documents. From my kitchen window, I could see Sandra in her backyard, aggressively pulling weeds from her flower bed while glaring in my direction. This had become routine behavior, so I thought nothing of it. I gathered the files I needed, sent a quick email to my client, and was preparing to head back to the office when I heard the sound of my home security system notification. The Ring app showed Sandra Martinez walking purposefully toward my car, with her keys clenched in her fist like a weapon. I watched in real time as she carved deep scratches along the entire passenger side of my Miata, then moved to the hood, dragging her keys in long, deliberate gouges across the custom paint. The whole attack lasted 93 seconds. She even paused in the middle to take a selfie with my damaged car in the background, later posting it to her Instagram story with the caption, "Karma for fake bitches who think they own the neighborhood." When she spotted me watching from my window, Sandra had shouted her comment about parking pretty, then added something that the doorbell camera picked up perfectly. "Maybe now you'll think twice before trying to steal my husband, you pathetic wannabe." That's when I knew Sandra Martinez had just given me everything I needed to completely dismantle her life. But I didn't rush outside to confront her. I didn't call the police immediately. Instead, I did what I always do when someone makes a serious mistake that I can document. I let them think they had gotten away with it, for exactly 48 hours. During those 2 days, Sandra's social media activity told me everything I needed to know about her mindset. She posted multiple stories about standing up to fake people and protecting your family from predators. She shared memes about queens who don't let anyone disrespect them. Most importantly, she left the selfie with my damaged car visible on her Instagram story for the full 24 hours, screenshotting it to her main feed with additional commentary about handling business. Meanwhile, I was building a case that would make the fraud investigations I handled for corporate clients look simple by comparison. First, I contacted my insurance company and reported the vandalism, providing them with the ring footage and requesting a detailed damage assessment. The estimate came back at $8,447 for paint repair, plus $2,200 for a rental car during the 3-week repair period. Next, I filed a police report, providing Officer Jennifer Walsh with the video evidence, screenshots of Sandra's social media posts, and my documented timeline of escalating harassment. Officer Walsh reviewed everything and immediately issued a citation for criminal mischief in the 2nd degree. But I was just getting started. My real specialty isn't just documenting crimes. It's following money trails and uncovering financial vulnerabilities. While Sandra was celebrating her victory on Instagram, I was conducting the kind of deep background research that had made me one of Colorado's most sought-after forensic investigators. What I discovered about the Martinez family finances would have impressed even my most meticulous colleagues. Miguel Martinez earned $127,000 annually from his dealership job, plus commission that averaged an additional $31,000 per year. Solid income, but not nearly enough to support the lifestyle they were flaunting on social media. Their mortgage payment alone was $4,100 per month on a house they had purchased for $650,000. With only 5% down. Adding in car payments on 2 BMW X5s, credit card debt, and their monthly lifestyle expenses, the Martinez family was spending approximately $138,000 per year while earning less than $160,000. More interesting was the paper trail I uncovered through public records and professional databases I had access to through my work. Sandra's lifestyle brand had generated exactly $340,000 in revenue over the past 18 months, despite her claims of being a successful entrepreneur. They were carrying $73,000 in credit card debt across 8 different cards, had been late on their mortgage payment 6 times in the past year, and had recently taken out a $25,000 home equity loan. The Martinez family was living paycheck to paycheck while maintaining an image of success that was completely fabricated. This gave me leverage, but I needed more than financial vulnerabilities. I needed Sandra to demonstrate a pattern of poor judgment that would convince a judge she was an ongoing threat to my property and safety. So I did something that in retrospect was probably the most strategically brilliant decision of the entire situation. I parked my rental car in exactly the same spot where my Miata had been vandalized. The rental was a bright red 2023 Camaro that my insurance had provided while my car was being repaired. It was actually more eye-catching than my Miata, and I made sure to keep it perfectly clean and positioned in my driveway exactly as I always parked my own car. For Sandra Martinez, seeing me continue to park pretty in the same spot where she had taught me a lesson was apparently more than she could handle. On Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the original incident, Sandra keyed my rental car. This time, however, I was ready. I had strategically positioned 2 additional ring cameras to cover different angles of my driveway, and I was working from home that day specifically because I suspected Sandra might escalate again. The footage from this second incident was even more damning than the first, because it clearly showed premeditation. Sandra had changed into dark clothes, checked to see if anyone was watching, and brought not just her keys, but also a screwdriver to maximize the damage. She caused $6,200 in damage to a car that didn't even belong to me. More importantly, she violated the restraining order I had filed earlier that week. What Sandra didn't realize was that her second act of vandalism had just elevated her situation from a simple civil dispute to a criminal matter involving multiple felony charges. Destroying a rental car meant she was now facing charges for damaging property belonging to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, a national corporation with lawyers who take property damage very seriously. But the real game-changer came when Sandra's social media addiction provided me with evidence I couldn't have obtained any other way. After keying the rental car, Sandra had apparently felt so proud of herself that she recorded a video for her Instagram story explaining exactly what she had done and why. In the video, she was sitting in her BMW, still holding the screwdriver she had used to vandalize my rental car, telling her followers that fake bitches need to learn lessons, and that she would keep handling business until certain people learn to respect other people's husbands. The video was only visible for 24 hours, but I had recorded it on my phone within 30 minutes of her posting it. More importantly, Sandra had tagged her location, providing GPS coordinates and a timestamp that perfectly correlated with my security footage of the vandalism. Sandra Martinez had literally provided a video confession to felony criminal mischief while holding the weapon she had used to commit the crime. On Monday morning, I walked into the Denver County Courthouse with a legal team led by Janet Morrison, the founding partner of my firm who specialized in high-stakes civil litigation. We were accompanied by Detective Ray Kowalski, who had taken over the case once Sandra's charges were elevated to felonies. The case we presented was devastating in its completeness. We had security footage from 2 separate incidents of vandalism, social media posts showing premeditation and celebration of the crimes, a video confession recorded by the defendant herself, documentation of escalating harassment and threats, financial records showing Sandra had no realistic ability to pay restitution through normal means. But the evidence that sealed Sandra's fate was something she never knew I had obtained. While researching the Martinez family's financial situation, I had discovered that Sandra was driving her BMW X5 without proper insurance coverage. Colorado requires comprehensive coverage on financed vehicles, but Sandra had reduced her policy to liability only. Coverage 3 months earlier to save money, without informing BMW Financial Services, who held the lien on her car. This meant Sandra was in violation of her finance agreement, and that BMW Financial had legal grounds to repossess her vehicle immediately. More importantly, it meant the BMW X5 she was so proud of could be legally seized to satisfy the judgment I was requesting. When Judge Patricia Coleman reviewed the case file, her response was exactly what I had hoped for. "Ms. Martinez," Judge Coleman said, looking directly at Sandra across the courtroom. "In 32 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear pattern of premeditated destruction, combined with such a complete lack of remorse. Your own social media posts and video statements make it clear that you view this as some sort of game rather than the serious crimes you have committed." Sandra's court-appointed attorney had tried to negotiate a plea deal involving community service and a payment plan for restitution. Judge Coleman rejected it immediately. "Additionally," the judge continued, "your financial records make it clear that you have no realistic means of paying the $27,147 in total damages you have caused. However, the court notes that you do own a 2022 BMW X5 with a current market value of $43,200. That's when Sandra finally understood what was happening. "Your Honor," she interrupted, "I need that car for work. I can't—" Judge Coleman cut her off. "Ms. Martinez, you should have considered the consequences of your actions before you decided to commit multiple felonies. The court hereby orders the immediate seizure and sale of your 2022 BMW X5 to satisfy restitution owed to Ms. James. Any remaining proceeds after legal fees and administrative costs will be returned to you." The judgment was for exactly $31,450, including punitive damages, legal fees, and compensation for my time and emotional distress. After the BMW was sold at auction, Sandra received exactly $2,100 back. But the story doesn't end there. 3 days after the court hearing, I received a call from Detective Kowalski informing me that the BMW X5 had been made available for purchase by victims before the public auction. The price was $29,500, exactly what Sandra still owed BMW Financial Services on the loan. I bought Sandra Martinez's BMW with a cashier's check that same afternoon. On the following Monday morning, I parked my new BMW X5 in exactly the same spot in my driveway where Sandra had keyed both my Miata and the rental car. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the neighborhood. Sandra and Miguel Martinez moved out of their house 6 weeks later. According to public records, they had fallen behind on their mortgage payments and were facing foreclosure. Miguel lost his job at the dealership after his employer learned about the legal situation. Apparently, criminal mischief charges were considered incompatible with working in luxury car sales. The house sold in a short sale for $89,000 less than what the Martinez family had owed on their mortgage. Their forwarding address, according to the Postal Service, was an apartment complex in Aurora, where rent started at $1,200 per month for a one-bedroom unit. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was what happened to Sandra's social media presence. After word spread about the court case, Sandra's Instagram followers began sharing screenshots of her confession video and her posts celebrating the vandalism. The story was picked up by local news outlets, then by national social media accounts that specialized in justice-served content. Within 2 weeks, Sandra Martinez had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of social media oversharing and the consequences of letting jealousy drive poor decision-making. Her Instagram account, once filled with lifestyle photos and inspirational quotes about being a boss babe, was deactivated permanently after she received thousands of comments from people who had seen her story online. 6 months later, I still park the BMW X5 in the same spot every day. Not because I'm trying to make a point, but because it's the most convenient location in my driveway for accessing both my front door and my mailbox. The car serves me well. It's reliable, comfortable, and perfectly suited for Colorado weather conditions. More importantly, it serves as a daily reminder of a lesson I learned throughout my career investigating fraud and financial crimes. Actions have consequences, and documentation is everything. Sandra Martinez destroyed $14,647 worth of my property because she was jealous of what she perceived as my perfect life. What she didn't understand was that my life wasn't perfect. It was built on years of education, hard work, and careful financial planning. The car she vandalized wasn't a symbol of privilege, it was a symbol of achievement, earned through providing services that help businesses and individuals recover from exactly the kind of poor decision-making Sandra had demonstrated. The BMW X5 I drive today represents something different. Proof that in a society governed by laws and evidence, patience and preparation will always triumph over impulse and emotion. Would I do anything differently if I could go back to that Tuesday afternoon when I first watched Sandra key my car? Absolutely not. Every decision I made, from documenting the harassment, to waiting for Sandra to escalate her behavior, to researching her financial vulnerabilities, was calculated to produce the most comprehensive possible resolution to a situation Sandra had created entirely through her own choices. The people in my new neighborhood often ask me about the story when they see articles about it shared on social media. My response is always the same. I didn't ruin Sandra Martinez's life. Sandra Martinez ruined Sandra Martinez's life. I simply documented the process and ensured that the legal system had access to accurate information about what had actually occurred. As someone who has spent her career following paper trails and building evidence-based cases, I believe deeply in the principle that truth will eventually surface if you're patient enough to let it develop and thorough enough to document it properly. Sandra Martinez provided me with everything I needed to hold her accountable for her actions. The security footage, the social media posts, the video confession, the financial records, the pattern of escalating behavior, all of that was her choice. My role was simply to ensure that evidence was preserved, organized, and presented in a way that allowed the legal system to function exactly as it was designed to function. Every morning when I start my BMW X5 and back out of the same driveway spot where Sandra Martinez thought she was teaching me a lesson about humility, I'm reminded that the most powerful form of revenge is often simply allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their own actions. The difference between Sandra and me was never about cars or social status or relationships with men. The difference was about understanding that every action creates a permanent record, and that record will eventually tell a story. I made sure Sandra Martinez's story was told accurately, completely, and with all the supporting evidence necessary to demonstrate exactly what kind of person she had chosen to be. The BMW X5 is just a bonus.